God, thank you so much that you brought all of us here together from all over the world. Thank you that we get to be together. Thanks for this awesome technology. God, I pray that you would be glorified, that your words would be heard, that you would empower these parents, empower ministers, give us what we need to serve you. We love you, God. We trust you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So this is what we're talking about today, how to do ministry with your family at church. On our first slide, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about me. I am a follower of Jesus, obviously. Why would I be here otherwise? The wife of the most amazing husband in the galaxy. He's amazing. We've been married for 23 years. So we've been doing ministry together the whole time we've been together. And I'm a mama of 3 wonderful kids. 2 of them are teenagers and one of them is in elementary school. So we have a good spectrum. I'm pretty busy around our house. I've been doing some sort of youth ministry for over 25 years now. So I've done everything from internships to volunteer to part-time, full-time, all sorts of different things. Been doing it since I was very young. And that's part of why this is so important to me. And this will come later in our conversation together. I've also been doing children's ministry in different capacities for about 12 years vocationally. But I actually started volunteering when I was 5 years old in children's ministry. I know that sounds crazy, especially if you work in children's ministry, but the mamas and aunties and grandmas that worked in the nursery when I was little just kind of took that time and took me under their wings and discipled me and giving me kind of Mama 101 tips and tricks about taking care of babies. And so I really have been volunteering in church since I was 5 years old in some capacity. I'm also an author and a speaker. Really, kind of my mission is to empower parents to train their children to know, love, and share Jesus. So almost all the stuff that I do just falls into those categories, really trying to empower parents. And a lot of that comes from my youth ministry background because of what I have seen in youth ministry and realizing the need to empower parents so that they can do ministry. So, okay. And we're talking where I have a lot of resources that I'd love to just get into your hands. We'll talk more about that kind of at the end. All right, Nikki, why don't you go to the next slide?
Okay.
Thank you. Nikki's being so sweet. She's my administrator. So this is all the things I just told you kind of about me. And okay, so the big question before we go to the next slide is, why does the topic of how to do ministry with your family at church matter? Why does it even matter? Part of the reason we need to talk about it is because so many believers have a wrong view of the church and its role in spiritually training children. And so here's what the truth actually is. Okay, go to that next slide for me, please, ma'am.
All right.
Church programming is a vitamin, not a meal. It's huge that we understand this. I think that if you work in the church and you've been going to church for a long time, you probably understand this. But a lot of times people think because we pay children's directors and youth directors and those kind of people, then it's their job to spiritually train our children. But the Bible does not say that. The Bible does not say that it is somebody else's job to train our kids. We are the primary evangelists and disciple makers of our children. And so what we should be feeding them at home is meals, spiritual meals, and then church is meant to be a supplement. So church programming is meant to be a supplement for what we're already giving them at home. And I think a lot of times we do it the opposite. A lot of times we go, church is going to handle that. I'll ask follow-up questions. What did you learn about in Sunday school? Those kind of things. We'll do our take-home sheet sometimes. And really, we are kind of abdicating the spiritual training of our children to other people. And we just need to recognize that that's not God's plan for us. So that's part of why this is such a big deal and part of why we're even talking about it today at all. The spiritual training of our children starts at home. So we're going to read through Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. Is anybody up for reading that one out loud? If you go to the next slide, Nikki, it's there. Anybody want to volunteer to read that guy for me? It's okay, I can do it if you don't want to. All right, I'll read this one aloud. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road, when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. Tie them to your heads and wear them on your forehead. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. So this passage of scripture is amazing for how we are to disciple our children. It's all throughout the day. Every opportunity we have to talk about the Lord, talk about the word with our children, we're to do that because we're supposed to model it. We're supposed to train them, teach them how to do that. And Sunday school and youth group training is so awesome. I mean, I've been working in the church for my whole adult life, and it's really, really important, but it is meant to supplement, not to be the main meal. So spiritual training should be happening first at home, but also something that we don't talk about very often is that part of our discipleship to our children actually happens at church. So part of how we disciple them to become adult Christians is to show them how to be adult Christians, by allowing them to be around other adult Christians, but also to help them practice as children and as teens. So we'll be talking about that some today too. Part of the reason this topic matters so much to me is because of what I call churchies. So churchies are kids who have grown up in the church, come to me in youth ministry, and have just always been in church, like the VeggieTales kids, the kids who have that's their whole world. And what ended up happening early on in my ministry is I saw a lot of different kids who had grown up in the church. Yeah, yes, you can totally have the slides. Absolutely. By the way, what ended up happening a lot of times with these churches is that they would only get a small part of what I was teaching them. And there were like gaps in their understanding of the word. There were gaps in their understanding of what it means to be a Christian. And a lot of that happened because they were not being discipled by their parents. A lot of that happened because they weren't owning their own faith, those kind of things. And so part of this too is a result of people seeing church, their role in church as just being an attender, not someone who actually engages and serves. And so a lot of those kids will have a basic understanding of the word if they're lucky. Hopefully they'll understand, hopefully, please Lord, they'll understand the truth about salvation. They typically will come to me and understand the fruit of the Spirit, full armor of God, and a whole bunch of the other kind of trends in children's ministry, kind of whatever is being promoted at that time in the realm of children's ministry. Unless the church has a strategic plan, and like we'll kind of go through a rotation and make sure the students and the children learn specific things and have a strategy. But even then, most students that I get, those churchies, don't integrate their faith in their daily life. They see the purpose for church attendance. They don't see the purpose for church attendance after high school. A really, really sad fact that's been happening for decades is about 80% of American Christian teens graduate from their faith when they graduate from high school. And so part of what's happening is this yucky epidemic, is what I would call it, of the children not growing up to understand how their faith really affects every other aspect of their life beyond Sunday mornings and youth group. Part of the problem there too is that those students don't know how to engage at church right now. And so they don't know how to then engage at church as adults. And so that's part of what we'll be talking about. So that it's all about me, church attendance, disease is part of what we're kind of talking about. But what we'll be talking about today is part of the antidote against that disease, that as we teach children and teens how to serve, doing that as a family, teaching them to do it as individuals, it really does fight against that. I go to church to be served, to be fed. It's all about me, and actually helping them understand what church is for. So that's why it matters. And you can hear me excited about it because I get real excited. I've been doing it for a long time, and I see the difference in the children and the teens who see serving as part of their faith. There's a huge difference. Okay, so before we jump into the practical, all the great tips I've got for you today, in the comments, or just turn on your video so we can hear your audio. I would love to know why you came today. What is it that brought you? What is it that you saw that you went, I just need to be there for this? How can I do ministry with my family at church? Okay, at this workshop, well, we don't even need to talk about who we have because you guys just told me who you are. But most of the people in church are either parents who, like, one person serves, volunteers in some way, and then their kids go to Sunday school and church on their own, or you might be in vocational ministry and one or both of you serve and your children go to Sunday school or student ministry, or maybe you are, one of those families who all of you serve together, like Katie was saying that you did on the mission field. And so wherever you are, whatever kind of season you're in ministry, this is for you. So there's going to be little tips and tricks for everybody as we go along. Okay, so the way that my brain works is I am all about the who, what, where, when, why, how. So that's what we're going to do. So Nikki, will you show us that next slide? And this is the time you get to start your worksheet. So these are the questions we're going to be answering in part today. Who can minister at church? What does serving at church look like? Where can we serve as a family in church? When and why should my family serve at church? And how can my family serve at church? And again, this is actually the devotional. These are the day titles, basically. This is what you're going to be getting in the devotional, but we're going to talk a little bit about it. So let's touch on that first one. Next slide, please. Who can minister at church? That little adorable kiddo who wants to give us a kiss. You can totally tell. Who can minister at church? Okay, so that the answer is actually anyone. Anyone can serve at church. There are no age limits to serving or using spiritual gifts. Please look it up yourself. Please, honestly, all those spiritual gift verses in the Bible, 1 Corinthians 12, Romans 12, there is nobody that says you can't serve until you're 18. And we found the best way to help children and teens serve at church is for them to start serving with somebody else, whether it's their parents or kind of apprenticing someone. And really, everyone is the answer to that question too. Everyone should be serving at church and using their gifts because it blesses and encourages everyone else. Go ahead, Nikki. I think the next slide has something else for us as well. Oh, not yet. Go back. I was just kidding. Those are the questions we're going to. Thank you. So one of the examples that I have of this is that little boy in John 6 who gave the disciples his lunch, absolutely everything he had out of his generosity. And Jesus didn't say, I'm sorry, you're not an adult. You can't serve yet. No, Jesus definitely welcomed that gift that he gave and the way that he served. And he blessed everyone that was in that whole huge crowd because of his generosity. And he blessed the disciples, specifically the apostles. And so that's just one example of the agelessness of serving at church. And so the two questions I want us to talk about a little bit in our discussion. Okay, next slide. This is where we're at now, Nikki. Thank you. The first one is, how old were you when you first started serving at church? Was it volunteer or paid? You guys know that I started when I was 5 volunteering, but I was on paid staff, and I think I was about 21 years old when I started paid staff. And then the next question we'll talk about is, have you ever felt like there was an unspoken or a spoken age limit to serving in church? So let's kind of talk about this. That first question, I'd love to hear your insight. How old were you when you first started serving at church? Adult? Yep, 12 years old. Awesome, Santiago, that's great. Middle school, helping with Awana. Oh, that's a great place to start. High school. Okay, so this is awesome. Adults. So lots of us either, we grew up with it, but most of us didn't start serving very young, right? But we don't want that for our kiddos. We want them to start as soon as they can. But teen, awesome. That's awesome. Yep. So this is the big takeaway from this one. There's no age limit. There's no age limit. We want kiddos to start serving as soon as they can. We go to a really awesome little church plant, and we've got a couple of 4-year-olds who are very serious about their serving at church. They know what their job is, what their roles are, and they're actually really, really helpful. It's taken a couple years to get them to the place where they're super effective at their jobs, but they do a great job. And it's a really cool thing to see little ones, because they just grow up knowing they can serve and not having any idea that there are people that wouldn't want them to serve because they're little, So it's awesome. Okay, so let's answer that next question. Have you ever felt like there was an unspoken or spoken age limit to serving in church? Yep, I do see that too, that often in smaller churches, there's more space for people to serve, but we'll talk some about large churches and all the different opportunities for kids to serve and families to serve together. Okay, let's go to that next question. The next focus, number 2. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Nikki. What does serving at church look like? This is kind of what we think. This is kind of what we think of when people go, I'm serving, I'm on the schedule once a month to greet. So I just thought it was a cute picture. So there's going to be 4 different ways to look at what serving can look like in church. There's lots of other ways that we can serve, little small ways, but big ideas. The first one is for us to start with willing hearts. So this is filling in your worksheet part of it. It's for us to serve with willing hearts. Serve where there's a need, not just where you feel comfortable. There's a lot of people who use the excuse, it's not in my gifting, to not serve in an area where they feel uncomfortable. And so we want to not use that excuse. We want to be willing to serve where God has that need for us to fill. Many people refuse to work with children because they're too messy, and teenagers because they're too loud. And yes, it's true. Children are messy and teens are loud. But Jesus said to welcome them. And part of how we welcome them is building relationships with them. Paul tells us to teach and encourage younger men and women in Titus 2. And part of what makes the body of believers awesome is the intergenerational relationships and learning opportunities. And so we want our children also to be building intergenerational relationships with adults, uncles and aunts and grandmas and grandpas, those ages. Another thought that God shared with me was the Proverbs 27:17 verse that we use a lot in men's ministry and women's ministry. It says, as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. But it doesn't just have to be men's ministry and women's ministry that we're sharpened. Really, sometimes working with children and teens sharpens us in ways that other relationships don't, or sandpapers us down. In some areas, we need that sandpaper down. So really, really need to approach things with a willing heart. So, I really want to serve where I'm actually needed to serve, not just where I feel comfortable. And sometimes when we serve in areas where we don't feel comfortable, it helps us grow. It helps us trust God in special ways. And the second area is after being willing in our hearts is actually using our gifts, using our spiritual gifts. Something interesting about my family is both of my parents were public school teachers. I had a math teacher and an English teacher as parents. And so it naturally flowed for them at different parts and seasons of our lives to actually use their spiritual gift of teaching in church, leading Bible studies or Sunday school and those kind of things. And so sometimes those spiritual gifts are more obvious than others, but it's really important for us to kind of look into that and talk together as a family and go, for example, you read about this in the devotional, there's a little girl that I know that obviously had the spiritual gift of teaching from the time she was tiny. I mean, 3 years old. And so her parents have been trying to figure out ways for her to use that spiritual gift now that I think she's about 8 years old, and figuring out how to help her use that gift within the church context and encourage her, because she really, really wants to be a teacher. We were just talking about it just this week. She really wants to be a teacher, but I'm like, great. Part of what's going to help her be a really good teacher in the world is for her to learn how to be a teacher of the word in Sunday school class. So we're working towards what does that look like for her? So that's an exciting place to be. So a couple of verses I wanted us to read together. Nikki, if you go to that next slide for me, please. One is 1 Peter 4:10. It says, God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. A lot of times we get confused about what the spiritual gifts are actually for. Some people use them because it makes them feel good, but really it's about serving the body of believers and serving each other. And then 1 Corinthians 12:7 says, a spiritual gift is given to each of us so that we can help each other. So if all of us are using our gifts, we're all empowering and encouraging each other in the body. If we're just attending and only, 10% of people are doing 90% of the work, or 20% of people are doing 80% of the work, we're not doing what God has designed us to do. Another area of ministry is actually creating what's called utility players. So children and teens who can serve in a variety of different ways. Some of us feel very more confident serving in one specific thing. I'm going to talk about teaching because that's a lot of what I do. But there's so many different ways that our kids can serve. I have been thinking about, um, you know, I have some teens that I've worked with that can lead music through playing an instrument, assisting in a preschool Sunday school class, greeting, setting up, taking down chairs, um, setting up for church events, running the sound system, being on the missionary prayer team. Like there's so many different ways that they can serve. And a lot of times we corner people because we want everybody to be able to serve. And so we give everybody a tiny slice of the pie. But really, the interesting thing about kids becoming utility players and learning how to serve in lots of different ways is that it helps them engage with different people at church. It helps them engage in church in a different way. And also it keeps church from being boring, which is a good thing, because I know a lot of us have struggled with that as parents. So training them in lots of different ways to serve, and kind of actually you can do that by allowing your kids or empowering your kids to serve in different areas and find out where their bent is, where they really get excited about serving, but helping them continue to serve with willing hearts. So if there's stuff that needs to be done, serve there, but it's okay that you really like serving in this other area differently. And then another thing to consider, the fourth focus here, is to protect and empower our children to serve. We need to make sure that our children take breaks if they need them. If you start seeing that your child or your teen is getting kind of burnout in the area that they're in, making sure that they get a couple of weeks break. If they need to refocus on the way that they're serving, help them do that, because you don't want them to burn out on serving because they don't have an understanding about, sometimes we have seasons of serving. And that's important for us to recognize. But one of the most important parts of this is not just going, okay, my kids need to serve because I don't want them to graduate from the church when they graduate from high school. Really, you got to do it first. We have to serve as examples first and serve as a family, and then we can help our kids serve individually. So that's kind of the direction we should go then. All right. Okay, so this section, we have a couple of questions to talk through. The first one, Nikki, will you go to the next slide for me, please? Okay, so just an easy question to just hit out there. What part of this section stuck out to you? What part stuck out to you from this section, and why? One of the things that I see is the need for specific training for people who are going to do teaching. So you want to make sure that they understand basic concepts, but think about how much that you learn when you're actually teaching. So a lot of times, like we had a young believer that was a Sunday school teacher and another church plant that we were a part of. And she kept telling me, I can't teach Sunday school. And she had like 3 kids. I was like, you will teach Sunday school. But I said, part of what you're going to do is you're going to learn the basics of the faith as you're teaching. And, but you want to make sure that they understand your expectations. So specifically in the context of teaching, you want to make sure that they have, make sure that everything is biblical. If there's anything that is not aligned with scripture, you don't want to be saying, those kind of things. And part of how you do that is either you disciple them while they're discipling their kids, or you take them apart and have a training time. You could actually do like a section where like a time where you try to meet with them before they're going to teach, to go over the material and make sure they understand it. So there's that. As far as like other areas of ministry, really they can just do it together and learn together. Just giving the instructions about goodness, so many different ways to do it. A sound system, or let's see, setting up for church plant, just giving the instructions to the adults and the children, and letting it happen, because a lot of times the kids will take the lead actually and get the work done that needs to be done. And they kind of own it. And then the parents go, sweet, you're doing a great job. I'm so glad we can do this together. And then they learn a different thing. And so there's lots of different ways to do that. But teaching is the one area of ministry that you want to make sure that they have the training that they need and the support that they need to take care of that and to do it well. But they're going to learn so much from teaching on their own. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
let's talk
helpful.
more about it. Okay, any other thoughts about this? Okay, so we have a great amount of good stuff to keep going on. So the next question is, what contributes to people's willingness to serve at church as a family? Like, what do you think adds to the desire for families to even want to serve at all in your church context? I'm going to throw this one out. I think a lot of it has to do with church leadership. I think a lot of it has to do with the church saying, giving people a space and a place to serve individually, but also including the kiddos. Because a lot of times we don't see them as able to do stuff. And so we want to make sure that, well, if you're a church leader, you want to make sure that you're making the space for families to serve together, but also to start having conversations with church leadership about what does it look like for families to serve together, individuals to serve together, that kind of stuff. So there's that. Any other thoughts on that before we move on? Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think a lot of times, there's certain roles that get a lot more accolades than others. And so I think really it's important for us to teach our children and teens that the work that happens in church isn't just somebody standing up and speaking. All the other things have to happen so that that can happen. So many different areas of ministry are needed for a church to work together. I was just talking to my son, allowed me to share this earlier at a different time, but he said, Mom, I learned a lot of things at church that I can use in real life. So I think a lot of the skills that they learn when they're serving with us, serving alongside us at church, really do translate into different settings, not just as adults, but in school now, in their communities and clubs and groups, teams, that kind of stuff. So that's awesome. I love that. You're totally right. And actually, I use that scripture in youth ministry a lot. Yeah, it's don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but set an example for the believers in speech and life and love and faith and in purity. And you can tell I teach on it a lot because I had it right there in my brain. But I think it's really important for us to teach children that too, that a lot of times God has gifted them in areas that the church needs. And it doesn't just need when they're 19 or 35. The church needs them now. Spiritual gift of encouragement. Church needs that now. That's really, really good. I think a lot of times families, if there are parents who feel like they have to serve, like we have to serve, this is what we do. A lot of times they will force their children to do something specific at church, but then it doesn't translate over into family life. It doesn't happen at home because they're putting on a show. And it can't be that way. It really needs to discipleship starts at home and ministry starts at home. And, the National Center for Biblical Parenting, often they'll say that the home is the lab for where everything else happens first, before you take your kiddos out to do those things. And so I think that's really true. And what you said also about families don't spend a whole lot of time together at home in the American context for sure. And so it's tricky. It's tricky to encourage that. But I tell you what, the family that serves together, there's some really good glue that happens when you do serve together and you have a mission. You take that mission together, that God's called our family to do this. It's really good. All right, so let's go on to that next question. Nikki, can you get us to the next slide there? Okay, the next question is, where can we serve as a family at church? So, like I said, there's different ways that your family can serve as individuals, but also as a family. A good place to start is to ask those who are already serving in the ministries that benefit your family, especially in a larger church context. Somebody who's already benefiting your family and serving, going, how can we help you? How can we come alongside you and support the ministry that you're doing? They're going to have some really good insights there. And then also taking time to serve as a family, even if you normally fill the pulpit. So I would say a lot of really good church leadership, what they're going to do, good pastors are going to go volunteer in the church, in the children's ministry when they get the opportunity, and go hang out with the teens when they get the opportunity to support those ministries. But if you are one of those church vocational ministry families right now listening, I would say take a Sunday off, get somebody else to preach, and go serve it as a family. Go take it for a preschool Sunday school class, or go teach Sunday school together. Whatever you can do to serve as a family, it's going to be a great example to your church family. It's going to be a great example, especially to your kiddos. And then look for a hole and fill it. If there's something, you just kind of stand back as a family and say, hey, we're trying to figure out where it is that we fit. What are we supposed to be doing? What can we do that's not being done? And, one of the ideas and examples that came to mind as I was praying about this is, if there's no one sitting with the widows at your church, adopt them as a family. Sit with them, take them to lunch when you can, invite them to come to your children's events, invite them to your home, your family gatherings, those kind of things. Adopting grandparents is an awesome way for your family to serve. That's something that you can do together. Another thing that I thought too is, really, wherever people are serving in your church, that's an opportunity for apprenticeship. So, because, they may get sick, those people who are doing the things that they're doing may get sick, and or need a vacation, or those kind of things, and be gone, and then there's nobody to do that role. And so that may be a way that you can step in and start training, apprenticing under those people to then take care of that when they're gone, or support them. Kind of lighten that load. Something that you all know, because you're, going to church, leading churches, is that nothing happens on accident on a Sunday morning, or whenever your church happens. It doesn't just all of a sudden poof. A lot of times people show up that are attenders, show up and go. They just come and they're served, and all these things it's magical. All these things show up, and then they get to leave. They high five everybody on the way out, and they're done. And then all the rest of us stay and clean it up and get it all ready for next week. And so, it's really important to think about, okay, what are all the things? What does it take for our church to be able to have our gatherings each week? What does it take? And how can our family come alongside the people who are doing all that work to make it happen, and empower them to continue that, or to, expand it, whatever that looks like. Another thing is just remembering to think outside of the box, as serving in serving as a family, setting up church potlucks, serving the church food bank, leading a Sunday school class as a family, not just one or two people. There's lots of different ways that I'm not even listing here, that you can do to serve as a family, but really it kind of comes down to asking church leadership, or the people that are already serving you, what's needed. For one, looking for those holes, and looking for who's already serving, and ways that you can support them. So those are kind of ways to do that. So just a couple of rhetorical questions. We're not going to answer these in our chat this time, but Nikki, would you go to that next slide for me, please? So who is it that loved you well from church when you were a child or a teen? And how did they love you well? Like, what sticks out to you in that memory that you have? And then the next question I would have you ask yourself is, who would you like your children to connect with at church? So I'm just going to share just a quick testimony about this. There was this elderly couple in my church when I was growing up. I grew up in a very small little Baptist church, and their names are Dorothy and Lyle, and they adopted me. I'm an only child. My grandparents lived 2 hours away from me, and they just adopted me. And I would end up, a lot of times I'd sit with them in church. And I can still remember what my grandpa Lyle smelled like. I can still, like, his cherry pipe that he used to smoke, and those kind of fun things. But, I remember singing with them. I remember going to their house and helping them do stuff around their house. I remember just those really cool relationships. And part of that was they just loved me and they wanted to adopt me, but really I chose them back. I think those intergenerational relationships that we can build at church are really, really good. And so then that next question is so important. Thinking about who you want your children to connect with. If there's somebody that you really respect, and you've seen the fruit of the Spirit in their lives, and you were like, man, my kids could really benefit. My son could really benefit from hanging out with this guy. Figure out where he's serving and connect your son with that guy. You can orchestrate those kind of relationships sometimes to help them grow spiritually, just by being with somebody else who loves the Lord. So kind of think about that too, because sometimes this where can we serve as a family is actually who can we serve with? What does this look like for our family? And so sometimes, like you were talking about, Katie, that it's kind of harder for families to serve together. Maybe this is one of those asking God individually, what do each of my kids need? And who's somebody who could come alongside me to do this together to disciple my children in this way. All right, let's go to that fourth question. Nikki, next slide. Thank you. When and why should my family serve at church? Okay, we're going to start with questions this time. Will you go to that next slide for me, please? Okay, what do you think, or how do you feel about the statement that many church attenders say they're a regular attender here in the United States if they attend 50% of the time? And that goes right into that next question. What does this habit teach children about the importance of the church? It is not a priority. If we're saying 50% of the time we're going to show up when we're going to show up, it's not a priority for our family. And it does reflect our faith in what we believe. I'm not saying if you're not at church every single Sunday, you're not a Christian. That's not what I'm saying, even at all. But I think that we can allow other things to get in the way and to distract us. And it definitely does not send our children the message that being in church is a priority. And so part of that, 80% of kids who graduate from high school graduate from their faith, that kind of stuff, it comes from part of that. And the other thing that happens too, if there is a strategic plan for children's ministry, for youth ministry at church, if they're gone half the time, that means they're only getting half that information. That's hopefully supplemental information, and it's disjointed. So what happens is when they get to me in youth ministry and the rest of us in youth ministry, then they know part of like Moses, but wasn't he the one who built the boat? No, Moses was not the one who built the boat. There's a disjointed understanding of the word, disjointed, like, I don't know what the Old Testament talks about, what the New Testament talks about. There's all that kind of, that continuity is gone for that. So we want to make sure that that's a priority. Okay, so let's go to that next slide. Though many of you likely know the answer to why we serve, we're here. This is just a reminder. It's right there on your worksheet. We serve to follow Jesus' example. And I didn't just give you one little verse. Go ahead. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John talks all about Jesus serving and who he is and his expectations of those who follow him. And that part of that expectation is to serve, that we learn about in John 13. We serve to obey his call to serve. He says, be like I am. Now that you've seen me do this, go do it. Go do it. We serve to connect with, to help, to motivate, and to encourage the body of Christ. We don't want to be the people who go, thanks for the food you served me this Sunday. See you later. See you next Sunday when you work really, really hard and serve everybody. We want to be part of the serving body. We want to encourage one another. We want to motivate one another to continue to serve, like Hebrews 10:23-24 says. And part of that is showing up, that 50% business we just talked about. But part of that is not just attending at church. It's teaching kids how to be servants, how to be like Jesus in that context. All right, let's go to that next slide. Next question. How can my family serve at church? What you'll see, the devotional, when you get the devotional is the last day shares some testimonies of how different families serve in their church together. But the answer for your family, Nikki, why don't you go to that next slide for me? Thank you so much. Oh, go back. Maybe I didn't give you the next, there we go. No matter how you serve, just serve. However God leads you and your family to serve, there's no cookie cutter here. Every family is different, especially if you've got people that are doing vocational ministry and they're leading. It's different for your children that serve. And if you're, going as a volunteer, as a lay person, and you're trying to figure out how your family can serve together, it's going to look different. So just trust God to lead you in that. It does make more of a difference in your children's lives than you might realize or have realized before walking in, but realize that that is really, really important. So remember to talk to your church leadership about opportunities, look for those holes. If you are the church leadership, then talk to people who serve in different areas, see where people are ministering already, and then talk to your family members about where they're feeling drawn to serve, like what they want to do. Maybe one of your kids really would love to learn sound system. Maybe one of your kids didn't realize that if they learned how to play guitar, maybe they could help lead music, you know, um, or play piano, or lots of different areas like that. So try to start talking to your kids about it and your teens about it. And then talk to parents as you're empowering parents, especially Ruth, when we were talking about that you're ready to empower other people to do this. Encourage them to look at their kids and go, hey, what is it that you would be really excited about going to church for? What is it the thing? So, for example, when you have utility player kids that can do lots of different serving, you're going to see there's some things that light them up more than others. Get really, really excited about, I don't know, playing the drums. Get really, really excited about like teaching the preschool Sunday school class, or greeting the elderly people that come, or praying for the missionaries that are at your church. Whatever it is that get really excited about, then pour into that. Give them more and more and more opportunities to do that. So do that. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of a closing before our question and answer time, just as an encouragement. When children and teens learn that part of their church experience includes serving, they'll serve organically as adults, especially the younger that you're teaching your kids this. But don't give up on teens. Please don't give up on teens, because they're ready to serve too. It's no wonder that people who think the church experience is just about attending or spectating get dissatisfied at church. Think about that. How can we think that our children, who we teach to lead and serve at school on their soccer teams and student councils and everywhere they're involved, are going to be satisfied to only be spectators at church? Because it's just going to be boring for them. If they know their capacity, if they know what they're capable of, then we say at church, just go sit over here and listen to everybody else teaching and watch everybody else doing things. They're not going to be as excited. Some of our children could probably run the church on their own. So we do them a disservice by modeling a spectatorship Christianity and teaching them that we go to church to be served instead of to serve. Likely we'll be blessed just by showing up and just by being at church, but we're all supposed to follow Jesus's lead and serve, ministering to others' needs, encouraging one another while we're together, and thinking more of others' needs than our own. And that's part of why we serve. We serve because Jesus says do it. There's that. But also part of why we serve is to get ourselves out of ourselves and recognize that other people have needs that we can meet. It empowers us to do it not just at home, not just at church, but also in the world. Because really what it comes down to is we're supposed to be Jesus. We're supposed to represent Jesus everywhere we go. And so we get to start in our lab of home, and then we get to take it to church, and then we get to take it to the world. And part of where we teach them to do that is in the church. So I'm super glad that you came today. We'll talk more. We're going to have our question and answer time, but I did tell you that I would give you some resources. So let me tell you a couple of cool things. I'm working with a publisher to get a book published by the end of this year. It's called 4 Keys to Keeping Your Children Engaged in Church. And so it's coming. It's coming. Part of what we talked about is part of one of those keys. So the third key is what we call, my husband and I call, the church skill set. And the church skill set is basically training our children how to serve now so that they have something to do when they graduate and move and go to a different church. Because a lot of times the reason that kids graduate from their faith is because they go to another church. Oh, there's a whole lot. We could talk about this for a whole nother session. But they go to another church and they look around and they go to be fed, and it's not youth group, and it's not all about them, and they don't necessarily like the music, and they weren't taught to serve. And so they go, I don't really like this. This is just me sitting here. I don't have to be here. But when we teach our children the church skill set, and we teach them that they're needed and they're valued, and that what they have to say matters, and that their being there matters, then they're more likely to go find a church that needs that role filled, and to continue to serve and to empower other people to do that. So that's one of the aspects that you'll learn in that book. So yeah, and I also write weekly parenting encouragement devotionals and a blog. And if you haven't signed up yet through this workshop for the Train Your Child emails, I hope that you really will, because I would love to be engaging with you there. You'll be the first to know when the book is published and when it's available. And then also you'll get those weekly encouragement emails. And also when you sign up, you'll automatically get my discipleship map, which I designed it to help parents take their kids to the next step in their faith. It's kind of a fun way to do it. You answer the question, do your children know how to pray? If yes, great, go to the next chapter. If no, this is how you can teach children how to pray. The next chapter, then you go, do your children know how to read the Bible on their own? If yes, great, go to the next chapter. If no, this is how you teach your children how to read the Bible and the validity of that. And there's 5 different chapters that go through that. And you just automatically get that for signing up at bethmeverden.com, or if you signed up for that as part of this workshop. So I hope that's a great resource for you, and just give it to everybody. Please give it to everybody. And there's a lot of other free resources on my resource page at bethmeverden.com. This QR code right here on your screen will take you to my link tree. And so it'll show you where my blog is and my website and all that stuff. Again, really, I just want to empower parents to train their kids to know, love, and share Jesus. That's kind of what it's all about. So I'm really excited that you came. Let me go ahead and pray, and then we can go into our question and answer time.